Mike, you mentioned Van Halen. I know both Musicians Institute and Van Halen play a very important role in your story, Mr. Ellefson, and the story of Megadeth. If you could tell the students.
Hence my Starwood T-shirt that I have. So anyway, in a distant galaxy many years ago, far, far away, 1983. I'm, in fact, the early 90s, or early 80s, excuse me, there was a band here from California called Van Halen, and they were really the trailblazer that really lit up the West Coast for being one of the first big, really hard rock, almost metal, but certainly hard rock band, and obviously Eddie was a guitar fanatic, and until then, I got all my information. I lived in Minnesota, in the middle of the country, and this is long before the internet, of course. And I pretty much get all my information through rock magazines. And Van Halen was blown up, and in 1981, I was rehearsing with my band in Minnesota, and something just hit me. There was an instinct that hit me that just said, you've got to get to L.A. And I think I went up into the house that day and said, Mom, Dad, I'm quitting school. I'm going to dye my hair blonde, get an earring. I'm moving to California. And they said, yeah, right. And so back to school I went. But I set the next 2 years course of my life on coming here to Hollywood, specifically to come to Musicians Institute, because this was at the epicenter of everything that was cool that was happening here in Hollywood. The guys from Toto would drop in and be instructors, and so all the great musicians that I was really fascinated with in the hard rock and metal community were dropping in here, and so I actually applied here and got accepted. And in May of 1983, I moved from Minnesota. Me and my three buddies moved out here, and through Musicians Institute, I actually they have like, I'm sure many of you, the apartment referral of where to live. So I got a referral to an apartment at 1736 North Sycamore, right over here, right? Maybe some of you even live there. And the lady who managed it, do you live there? Is that a hat? Nice, yay. So there's a story to this. So I move out here. Elvina, I remember is her name, and she's from a little town, Mountain Lake, Minnesota, close to home. And so all these threads started coming together. So I move out here. I remember going in and getting the app, the kind of thing where I had to come in and do my audition. Well, it turns out, one morning I wake up and I start playing the bass. Apparently I'm told it was Running with the Devil by Van Halen.
Boom,
yeah, boom. Which is about 8 really simple notes, right? But this flower pot
one simple note.
One simple note.
Played 8 times.
Played 8 times, yeah. Comes smashing down with a shut the f*** up. And I was like, wow, these neighbors aren't very friendly here in California like they are in Minnesota. Well, it turns out there's a blonde-haired guy walking around the complex. We go up, we knock on his door. It turns out he lives right up above us. He happens to be what appears to be a budding young rock star by the name of Dave Mustaine. And he had just gotten released from this brand new group I hadn't heard of yet called Metallica. And because, again, I got all my information by way of magazine, right? And so Metallica was from Los Angeles, had relocated up to San Francisco to acquire this bass player named Cliff Burton. And in so doing, and Mark will attest to this, essentially planted themselves and that's where the whole Bay Area thrash scene started, in which Metallica was clearly, the big 800-pound gorilla. And so Dave and I, we meet, we start chatting, we jam a little bit. A couple of the first songs that he had was, I don't know if you saw, but this year is the 35th anniversary, 35 years of Megadeth. And one of the very first songs that he wrote, coming home from his stint with Metallica, was a song called Megadeth. Which was later retitled Set the World Afire. Didn't make it on a record till our third album. But some of the earliest songs off Killing Is My Business and Peace Sells were songs that he was working on, and very charismatic in his writing. And quite honestly, Dave was the first rock star that I met when I moved here. I mean, you could tell sitting in the room with him, this guy was the real deal. There was a lot of people walking down the boulevard that looked like Vince Neil. There was a lot of people that looked like David Lee Roth, but Dave was the real deal. And by way of, the two of us both being named Dave, our love for heavy metal, I'm kind of like, Minnesota nice, as they call it. This kid from the farm in Minnesota, and I meet Dave, who's, kind of a street kid from California, and we formed Megadeth, as it turns out. And so that happened as a result of Musicians Institute.